Hey buddies, Miss Puggy here coming at you with another Borderlands 3 video. Today a new event just came out called the True Trials. So every week there's going to be a trial that they're going to amp up to make all the enemies have a health pool of in the billions. And the trial itself, I've tried it with a couple of builds now, is actually pretty decently tough. I had a couple of bad attempts, but I think I found the 4 best builds you can use with each Vault Hunter. These builds specialize in dealing billions of damage, sometimes just millions of damage, but not only that, they also specialize in keeping you alive except for one build. All these builds are great in any situation. They can clear any game content, including the true trial of survival. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We just hit 900 subscribers and we are getting really close to 1,000. Thank you very much for everyone who's subscribed, and let's continue. So let's first get into the first build we have here, which is Moze. Now this Moze build that we're running is all about dealing the most amount of damage with Moze and Iron Cub at the same time. So of course we're using a flare. This flare has some secondary stats that allows us to deal crazy amounts of damage. The main weapons of this build is the plasma coil, the sellout, and the scourge. Most of the time you're just going to be having the plasma coil out. The plasma coil and the other weapons have the anointment while Iron Bear is active. Railgun damage is increased by 100%. The reason why we have that is because we want to optimize the gun damage that Iron Bear has as well. So of course we are running a railgun build. So here's the skill tree that we're using. We go middle in red, down to specialist bear in green, all the way end in purple, and just tier 2 on blue. The reason why we do those is because it optimizes Moze damage to the best of the ability while also allowing us to deal crazy amounts of damage with Iron Cub. The way you can stay alive with this build is using Rush Offensive. Rushing Offensive does allow you to get lifesteal when you are dealing damage with your grenade as well, so you just gotta constantly be sprinting, you'll never die. So speaking of grenades, we're using a recurring Hex with the anointment while Iron Bear is active, which also includes Iron Cub. Throws out a grenade with a 20% chance every time you get hit. Hex does a lot of damage with this build, and besides that we're using the Elemental Projector Victory Rush. Now I've recently been told that Victory Rush has been bugged, which is a little unfortunate because that's my go-to Elemental Projector, but besides that, the Elemental Projector is a great artifact that you can use in any build. Of course we have an area of effect, damage secondary stat, and 24% shock damage to optimize this Tesla coil damage, and we have a sellout which allows us to just activate our Elemental Projector whenever we want. We're also using a Infernal Wish to double our damage with all these weapons as well. With action skill N, kills increase Iron Bear's cooldown rate, which does, despite it saying after exiting the Iron Bear, does act as an action skill N, so you can still use that with Iron Cub. If for whatever reason you get down with this build, you do have the Scourge with the same anointments as the other weapon. The Scourge does crazy amounts of damage, and every single rocket you send out, of course, sends 2 because you're using the Infernal Wish. This allows you to just get up whenever you want. Now, I've never had any problems with this build where I got downed with this challenge, so Plasma Coil is just crazy. You can just constantly shoot it and you'll never have any problems. I am using Mayhem 10 just to increase our gun damage by 25%. You could also run this build on Mayhem 11 as well. In just case those of you don't know, to get to the trial survival, you have to get a quest that is usually located right here. If you have never unlocked this location, you would get a little exclamation point like this, but instead of over there, it'd be right here. You just click it and then you go to Sanctuary, and then it would just ask you to navigate all the way back over the map, which is called Guardian of Dawn. Now that we explained that, let's move on to our next build. So next build that we're running is an Amara build that I just actually posted, and you could of course click the link up here for all these builds for a more in-depth guide, and of course there'll be save files down below for all these builds as well, and in the description if you don't see it in the comments. This Amara build does fantastic with dealing tons and tons of action skill damage and gun damage at the same time. It is a fantastic light phase flare build. It optimizes the phase flare as said before, so that's our action skill damage, and optimizes in our gun damage, which is where we have this artifact. Since you're using a phase flare build, you of course want to optimize in one element, which is shock, so we're optimizing the shock element by using a revolter action skill activate shield break effect triggers. So with this build, I'd just like to have the free radical out, just shooting enemies all around. Just like the last build, we could use our sellout to use an elemental projector to increase the amount of damage we deal. All you got to do to activate a shock dot is activate your action skill, which will activate your revolter effect, and now you can apply 2 dots on yourself, which is shock and fire. Besides that, we're also using a Guardian Angel, which optimizes the bossing damage on this build, because this build does great on mobbing, but to optimize bossing damage, you want to have the Guardian Angel out in your hands if you're fighting the boss at the very end. The only problem that you'll run into, the boss is immune to shock and I believe fire as well. You will want to switch to another element. After that, I've would suggest using the Corrosive Cold Hotted Augment right there. I have no problems after switching there. Of course, you could also use some of the other weapons we have on this build as well. We're using a Kinetic Light Speed Grenade that just increases our damage by 25% on grenade throw, and we're using a Death Blessing to optimize our gun damage. It does have 2 points in Ottman, which gives you 45% total action skill bonus damage with the Phase Flare, which just allows us to deal crazy amounts of numbers. This build is able to do 1 billion damage with 1 hit on Grave Ward. Here's a skill tree, go all the way down on purple, mid on blue. Down here's Sustenance with red, so we get lifesteal as well. Never die because of Sustenance, and we just have 3 points in the personal space. And let's move on to the next build. Now, those of you know who've been on my channel for a long time, I love Peregrine builds, so of course I had to fit one in here. So this is my most powerful Peregrine build. With this build, we're able to deal 1 billion plus damage against the raid boss, despite the rack attacks not being able to hit the raid boss. Since we're using a Peregrine build, that just obviously means we're using a Peregrine class mod. On top of that, I like to use an Elemental Projector Deathless. The reason why we use a Deathless is because we have a URAD on our Guardian Angel. The Guardian Angel, of course, optimizes our action skill damage since it's all about that. There's no shooting required. Of course, you could shoot the Guardian Angel, but it's absolutely not required. With this build, it does add a little bit more damage, but you could totally just use action skills. I do have a Hazardous Sellout in case you want to activate Elemental Projector on this build as well with the action skill Activate Revolter, same as the other builds. We're using a Light Speed Shock Grenade with the Anointment action skill activated. Grenade damage is increased by 150%. The only 2 weapons you want to worry about is the Guardian Angel and the Sellout on this build. I have another Guardian Angel that I don't feel like is necessary on this, which increases the amount of damage we deal by 3 times when enemies are above 90% health, but I say just go for the URAD. You'll have no problems with this build. Since it's URAD, you don't have to worry about the shock immunity at the end of the boss fight, because despite not being able to deal any shock damage, you'll still have the URAD radiation bonus, which just kills enemies very, very easily. Since we are Flak, our light speed can crit with a Megavore skill, so that's very, very useful. Very brain dead skill. You use activate the action skill and the grenades do the rest. So since we are using a crit focus build, we want to go all the way down on red. We go all the way down on green. The reason why I do that is because we have liquid wounds, which does allow you to revive in case you ever get down, which can happen. So it's very, very useful to have. And the power inside, which increases the amount of damage we deal every single time we activate our action skill. And that's pretty much it. It's very, very easy skill tree, just green and red. Just remember, use Flock and Load and Rack Celebrate to increase the amount of times you can send out your rack attack. And last but not least is Zane. So this Zane build is all about dealing melee damage. I know right off the bat you'll say that the White Elephant got nerfed, so there's no point in running this build, but the White Elephant still does decent amount of damage, and the Face Puncher does great amount of damage. It is a Terry build, so you might not be able to replicate this build unless you have these particular 2 items, which is a Face Puncher with melee attacks 25% to apply terror to yourself, and the Merv Hex, which just allows us to increase our damage and fire rate the more terror we have on ourselves. The main focus on this build besides that is using a Frozen Heart with action skill Activate, which allows us to just send Novas all around. This allows us to instantly freeze everyone around us, which allows us to, I believe it's 2 times or 3 times more damage against frozen targets when using melee. So all you got to do is just activate your Mantis Cannon, which you have 5 charges of with this build, so you can activate it constantly and then just shoot them with the Face Puncher. Now, the Frozen Heart seems to deal crazy amounts of damage. It is able to deal 6 million damage per Nova for me around all the enemies around me, so it's very, very easy to kill the enemies with this build. Besides that, I'm using a Seeing Dead because of course I am. Zane is great with Seeing Dead, everyone knows that. It does have some splash damage, which allows the Frozen Heart to deal more damage, on top of the White Elephant also dealing splash damage and having a secondary stat area of effect bonus damage. You don't need to worry about any of the other weapons. All you gotta do is just focus on Face Puncher. This is the build we're using. We go middle on green because we are trying to get the Dome Shield, because that is very, very useful for defensive purposes. We go all the way down on purple because we want to get this action skill Augment and No Way Out to increase the amount of damage we deal and the amount of charges we have with this build. Go all the way down on Hitman because of course you do. Blue Tree is absolutely excellent with the kill skill, so there's no reason not to run that. And we got 1 point of Salvation, which just allows us to heal all the way no matter what, because we're dealing millions of damage every single time we shoot our gun. And that's all the builds. All these builds were able to clear the true trial survival very, very easily day 1. I had no problems with these builds clearing the event. Don't forget to get the save files down below if you want to try try out any of these builds, or if you want to get a more in-depth explanation on all these builds, click the links up above, which will provide the links to the 4 videos that explain these builds very, very well. Besides that, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him out with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on a wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.